So next month, the ATF plans to drop their new rule, which will restrict the sale and possession of so-called ghost guns. So let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you think the ATF needs to be abolished, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Also, I want to thank a supporter of this channel, which is Axel Ear Pro. If you guys aren't aware of Axel, they have these Bluetooth digital ear pro. They're really good, especially for when you're in outdoor ranges or if you don't like earmuffs. These actually help, and they just kind of wrap around your ear. It's all electronic. It's really good for noise suppression, but also you don't have to worry about if you have a giant earmuff and you're shooting a rifle, you kind of breaking that seal where sound can get in. This is a good option. If you guys are interested, you can use the link down in the details section to go over to Axel. And thank you again, Axel, for supporting this channel. So I guess in the intro, we now know that next month in early April, the ATF plans to drop their new rule, which will restrict the sale and possession of so-called ghost guns. Last year, the ATF introduced two new proposed rules. The first was a new definition relating to frames and receivers, making 80%ers, polymer 80s, and 3D printed devices, and essentially changing the definition and making them firearms. The other proposed rule was in relation to pistol braces. The new pistol brace rule essentially made any firearm with a pistol brace an SBR, and therefore subject to NFA taxation and registration. When the ATF introduced the proposed rules, a lot of us actually went out and commented in opposition, but as many of us expected, the tyrannical ATF is now moving forward regardless of our comments. So first, let's talk about the frames and receivers proposed rule, what it is, and then let's talk about what the White House comments were in regards of them releasing the new rule next month. If you aren't aware, last year the ATF introduced a proposed rule which sought to bring all 80%ers, also 3D printed devices and other uncompleted or incomplete like frames and receivers within the definition of a firearm, within the frames and receivers definition, and therefore actually treat them as firearms. Currently, incomplete lowers and 3D printed items are treated just as chunks of metal or plastic and therefore are not regulated under federal law. However, this new rule seeks to change that and to treat them as actual firearms and subject them to serialization and background checks. Also, the rule included mechanisms where currently possessed items would also need to be serialized. The Department of Justice stated it proposes amending the ATF regulations to provide new regulatory definitions of firearm frames or receivers because they are allegedly outdated. Those definitions, they say, are outdated. The department also proposed amending ATF's definition of firearms and gunsmith to clarify the meaning of those items and of those terms, and to add new regulatory terms such as complete weapon, complete muffler or silencer device, privately made firearm, and readily for the purposes of clarity, given advancements in so-called firearms technology. Furthermore, the Department of Justice said that they proposed amendments to the ATF's regulations on marking and record keeping that are necessary to implement all of these new amended definitions. The DOJ stated that this new rule is intended to clarify the definition of firearm and to provide a more comprehensive definition of frame or receiver so that those definitions more accurately reflect firearms configurations not explicitly captured under the existing definitions. Further, this new rule proposes new terms and definitions to take into account technological developments and modern terminology in the firearms industry, as well as amendments to the marking and record keeping requirements that would be necessary to implement these definitions. So that is what the DOJ is saying as far as their purpose for these changes. Now, the last update I gave you all on this frames and receivers proposed rule and this whole issue was that in the Federal Register, the DOJ indicated that it planned to drop this new rule on frames and receivers in June of 2022. So June of this year is when the ATF was stating they plan to drop their new rule, changing the definition of frames and receivers to include within that definition 80% lowers, 3D printed lowers, and other incomplete devices. This timeframe was also supported by comments from Marvin Richardson, the acting director of the ATF, who made statements during SHOT Show that the rule banning online sales of so-called untraceable ghost guns would not be completed until June. However, we recently found out from unidentified White House officials that the ATF is pushing forward that timetable and now plans to introduce the new rule on frames and receivers in early April. In a New York Times article on this issue, it states, Ms. Iverson, the Justice Department spokeswoman, said Mr. Richardson was simply reading from a White House Budget Office document when he cited the June deadline for the ghost gun rule, which had been delayed by the need to sift through more than 250,000 public comments. Mr. Richardson dedicated 30 ATF staff members to process what was the largest ever response to a firearms proposal, she stated. But two unnamed White House officials, on speaking on this whole issue and the comments made by the acting director on the June deadline, they said that the new rule would in fact be finished by early April. They said that another claim by Mr. Richardson that the enforcement of the regulation would begin 90 days after the rule was completed was also off base, and that the gap would be much closer and would likely be 60 days, not 90 days. So all signs point towards the ATF introducing their new ban on so-called ghost guns in early April, and then they will attach a 60-day compliance period with that new rule. This is in contrast to what we have seen with some other rules where you get a 90-day kind of compliance period. So not only will the ATF be introducing this new rule sooner than we expected, but they will also have a shorter time period for compliance. And this will likely lead to everybody within the US having to be in compliance on this new rule on frames and receivers in early June. So early June is when everybody will have to be in compliance, and they're going to drop this new rule in April and then have that really quick 60-day time period. This is being done likely in reaction to multiple comments made by Biden, especially the most recent comments during his State of the Union. Biden and his administration have been calling for Congress to pass a ban on so-called ghost guns, along with other things like magazines and rifles as well. However, he has been unable to receive these types of bans from Congress. In reaction, his administration has been catching a lot of scrutiny from gun control groups who are claiming Biden is failing to deliver on his promised gun control agenda that he ran on. This new push for an early release of the frames and receivers rule by the ATF is no doubt a result of the Biden administration putting pressure on the ATF to get this done sooner. Also, he's likely trying to win whatever political capital he can right now, especially with gas prices at an all-time high and all the international unrest unfolding during his presidency. So he's going to try to win whatever he can, get whatever he can done right now, because everything else in his presidency is unfolding. I would also not be surprised if we find out that the new pistol brace rule will be finalized sooner than we had thought. Currently, indications are that the Federal Register has stated that the kind of time period for that final rule would be expected by August of 2022. However, this could also be months earlier, especially if Biden wants to push the ATF on that proposed rule as well. Undoubtedly, I would expect when these new rules hit, there will be cases that pop up challenging them. However, these new rules are another important teaching lesson for all of us. When the ATF first went after bump stocks and challenged that definition on bump stocks and changed all of that, a lot of people in the US said, who cares? I don't care about those. That's stupid. Who cares if they change the rule? Well, this is why we should care. If you thought the ATF would stop at bump stocks, you were sadly mistaken. Bump stocks were just a test run, and now they're moving towards more popular items. And it's only a matter of time before they move on bigger ticket items. So first they moved on bump stocks. Now they're moving on things like frames and receivers or 80%ers. And then they're going to move towards pistol braces, treating anything with a pistol brace to be an SBR. And who knows what they're going to go after all of that. So as we get more information on these, I will definitely let you guys know. If you have any questions, go ahead and comment down below and I'll try to answer to the best of my ability. Also, if you like this video and want to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm or fuel Algore's rhythm. It adds fuel to his jet and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of two-way news. Again, I cannot thank you enough for everybody who likes, comments, subscribes, who hits the notification bell, who shares these videos. You guys are directly impacting these videos, impacting this channel, and helping me to reach and educate more people than I could have ever thought. So thank you so much for all of your support. If you don't have a comment in mind, just comment down below, just comment fuel the algorithm, and that really does help the channel. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.